Well, good morning, good
Good
morning, good
morning.
morning, everyone. Got
Good morning.
Augustina Jones. Oh, that's an old school thing. All right. Let everyone join here in a second.
All right.
Oh, there he is. To the
Oh,
stage here.
Gentlemen, I'm just making an appearance. I can't be in here. I'm sorry. I have to. I, I've had a real rough night, and so
uh-oh.
just to make an appearance, saying hi.
Okay.
Well,
But
good morning.
You're
you're
looking.
gonna have to carry on without me.
All
Love
right.
you guys.
Oh, it's all good, boss.
Sorry
Okay.
about that.
All right.
Take care. Okay, so good morning, Connie. Good morning. All
When
right.
I'm weak, he is strong. Yes, that's the idea. And Carrie says bye to Michael. All right.
All right, guys. So today's focus is about bonds. Forming a bond with someone that you can't explain, you can't write down, you can't point a picture to it and says that's what it is. But throughout our lives, there are people that we meet, that we connect with, and we form a bond with. Now, today's focus is on how hard times can form strong bonds and strong people. So, before we go any further, Joel, is there anyone in your life that you have that bond with? It could be family, it could be anyone that bonds because you guys went through a hard time together.
Um. Yeah, I can't really say I've lived kind of a charmed life. I haven't really been through what anybody reasonably would call hard times.
Hmm.
There's been challenges for sure.
Hmm.
Um, you know, there's family members. There's a cousin I know that I rarely see anymore. And uh, when my mom died, uh, I remember being at the service and I hadn't seen her in probably, I hadn't seen my cousin in 15 years probably.
Oh, wow.
And my aunt too, her mom. And I was fine until they walked up to me and then I completely lost it and just
Oh,
blubbered
wow.
into their arms. And I don't know why it was that cousin, other than she's a very uh, unique person and she's quite a special person. Um, but I never understood why. And ever since then, we see each other sporadically, but every time it's like we get into these. Um, she came when her nephew died. My other cousin's son. She came
Mhm.
to me and she just. I'm the one that she had to put her shoulder on and cry. I said, "Come on, let's cry it out. You don't stop until you're done," kind of thing. And so that was just, I don't know if it's hard times, but it's just doing life. When you do life
Mhm.
uh, realistically, and you're doing your best in life, and you're you're figuring things out. And my wife and I have gotten closer over the years because we
Oh, yeah.
you know have struggled through it. Especially we just moved and are remodeling a house and putting on an addition. It's incredibly stressful, but
Absolutely.
and that either breaks you or it brings you together. And by the grace of God, it's bringing us closer together. So, yeah.
And that's really the focus is when that brings you together. Like you were saying that you haven't seen that cousin forever, but the hard event, the traumatic event of losing a loved one in that moment for you, it brought you closer. It formed that
Right.
bond with someone that you haven't really seen in forever. And I
Yeah.
guess that's the focus today is acknowledging the fact that there will be people in your life that you will go through a crucible with, a traumatic event with, or something like that. And after you endure that together, all of a sudden, when you see him again in the future, whether it's every day or once every few years, you automatically connect better than you probably do with other people that you know. You connect because you went through that pain together. And that's the main takeaway.
Yeah.
This topic really came up recently. A couple weeks ago, my wife and I went down to College Station. College Station is the home of Texas A&M University. That's where I went to.
Mhm.
Now, Texas A&M is a very old institution, and they have a group called the Singing Cadets. They are an all-men's choir. They've been around since 1893, and this year was the 130th reunion. So we had members, formers, all the way back to the late 50s who were able to make it. Over close to 300 people were there, which is really cool. Now, the thing is, I don't know all of them because they're just different generations. But I was excited to go down to meet my buds. So whenever you become a senior cadet, your first year is horrible. It is rough. It sucks. You have to do a lot of things that the upperclassmen don't have to do, because that first year is your probationary year, and you have to do a lot of things to prove that you are of good character. Okay. And so that first year is really rough. But the bond I formed with my buds, and keep in mind, these are kids. I was a non-traditional student. I came in after the Air Force. I was in my late 20s, early 30s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I'm becoming very close with these 18, 19-year-olds. And so after that year, we became very close. And it's a small group of people, like 25 people, give or take. They're my buds. And we haven't talked to each other. We haven't seen each other years. We don't talk on a daily basis. But when I saw them, my wife and I could tell, oh my gosh, it's my buds. Immediately, we treat each other like it was yesterday. That bond was formed because of that pain, because we went through that painful time together.
Yeah.
And so let's do a quick little run through the chats. That one's beautiful. Absolutely.
That's right. Yeah, I was part of a very dynamic college ministry, at San Diego State, where I went, back in the day, late 70s, early 80s, and a couple different, one through Campus Crusade for Christ. That was a very large on-campus ministry, and then my church, which was down the street from San Diego State, had a very big and dynamic college group, and a lot of us were interns in ministry interns. That's like 20 full-time ministry interns just in this college department. And I don't know whether it was exactly rough times, but we had a mission. We weren't just a club. We were sharing on campus. We were doing campus-wide outreaches. We were going down to Mexico, because Mexico's right down there to the orphanages, or
Right.
Tijuana, to the dumps sometimes, because people live in the dumps, right? And you do get a fair amount of resistance on a college campus,
Sure.
That's just the atmosphere that it's in. I wouldn't call it hard times, but we had that shared mission through those both. And, now that we're older, and some of those leaders and stuff are one recently passed away. And again, it seems to be it's manifesting itself when I go to funerals or memorial services, but that's when this time of life I'm in now. But those people, I ran into a couple that I hadn't seen in 40 years. His name happens to also be Joel, and we were talking like we had been spending the last 40 years together. And so I don't know. And I think you've been in the military, and I'm surprised you haven't mentioned any military bonds or anything like that. You have with military people, which is where I thought you were going with this. I've never been in the military, and I think one of the reasons our society is fragmenting so much
Mhm.
is we don't have, especially the men in our society, don't have a shared experience in the military where years
Right.
ago,
Right.
everybody was in the Army or the
Right.
Navy or something. Um,
Mhm.
and you have that, even if you weren't serving with that person, you knew
Had
what,
that connection.
yeah, and you spoke the same language. I've got a Marine
Right.
neighbor, and he was talking about going on a fishing trip, and he goes, "Yeah, there were some Marines on the fishing trip. They chewed the same mud I chewed," and I'm like, "That's a great." Sometimes probably literally, but
Yeah.
it's also
Yeah.
just a great analogy for bonding in something that's incredibly difficult. And he did 5 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. This
Yeah.
guy's got more toughness in his little finger than I got my whole body. But and so it's that way with one of the reasons we have trouble with guns in our society is because
Mhm.
years ago all the men went through the military and were trained how to use a gun. They were trained how to respect it, how to break it apart, how to use it. We don't have that anymore. Um, s- all those things that
Mhm.
military service brings into you, and you go through it with all these other men, and you have that strong male leadership. You have
Mhm.
a purpose. You have a mission. You worked hard through it. You had to help each other out. You had to cover for each other. You had to choose the same mud, whatever you want to call it. We don't
Mhm.
have that anymore, and I think that's one of the big reasons um, men are in such crisis now.
So
They're yeah.
on that note, great point by the way. The reason why I didn't automatically go towards my military service was because getting out, like I absolutely have close bonds with a lot of people that I served with, absolutely, especially in the military. But getting out was harder. This is the biggest issue that I'm a huge advocate for is veterans transitioning into civilians.
Yes.
That I honestly would much rather, to be completely honest, I would much rather go back to Iraq and Afghanistan than
Well, let me.
go through transitioning, becoming a civilian, because that's what causes so much struggle with veterans, is
Mhm.
because we
But
were
wouldn't
never
it be
taught
better? Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt, but wouldn't it be better
that. Mhm.
or easier for you if there were veterans all around you, men who had served that you could talk to? It's I but since not everyone used to go through the military. So when you got out of the military, there were ex-military people all around that understood and
Right, yeah.
that you spoke the same language. You weren't a stranger
Mhm.
or you weren't an outsider going back into society because society was full of military vets.
And that's
Um,
why I went to A&M,
okay.
because Texas A&M is so a little history. In Texas, Texas A&M, that university was the first public university in the state, but it began as a military academy.
Yeah.
It began as all cadets, all military. It wasn't until 1963, the early 60s, that it became open to everyone, not just those who were pursuing a military career. And so for me, I needed to find a school that was conservative, that had a big veteran population, that took care of veterans, and A&M had that. A&M has the Corps of Cadets, so I was in the Corps of Cadets, and I also was a senior cadet as well.
All right.
And I went there because I was
Excuse me.
surrounded by veterans. I was surrounded by people who understood.
Right.
Now, to be fair, there's other campuses all over, all the other colleges that have big groups of veterans. I went to UTA for my master's degree, and they have a big veteran population. So, but you're right though. I would seek other veterans to be around
Right.
just so I had that support network. But what made this singing cadets so different for me was that all of a sudden I'm in a group full of young kids, 18 to 21 max. And I'm in my early 30s.
Right.
When I first got to singing cadets, I was kind of arrogant, I'll be honest with you. I thought my poops don't my I thought that my poop don't stink. I thought I had all my things covered. I thought, "Oh, I'm a veteran. I've been all over the world. I have the experience. I can do this. But the thing is, that first year is really hard. And let me explain. Your first year in the scene cadets, you are called a buffo. A buffo is Italian for a clown of the opera. And basically, you're in charge of setting up and tearing down all the equipment for all the concert. You are in charge of coordinating logistics. You're in charge of a lot of things. But the biggest thing is you can't say words. There are certain words you can't say. Now it sounds silly, but it's supposed to teach you how to think before you speak. It teaches you how to represent yourself well because you have to think about what you're saying. But Scene Cadets is the only student organization on campus that is allowed to stay in host homes. So whenever we tour all across the nation doing concerts, we don't stay in hotels. We stay in host homes, local people in that area who open their homes for us to stay in. And so we have to represent A&M very well. We have to be on our A game. We can't be stupid. So learning how to think before you speak is just one of those things that we did. Point is, I went through it with these kids. After that first year, all of a sudden, here I am with having great friends who weren't in the military. They were young people who I normally would never associate with. But we shared that struggle together.
Right.
And I think that's the main point of this. What your job was, such as military, what your age is, doesn't just that doesn't you can't form those bonds just in those areas. You can form a strong, unbreakable bond with anyone. And that's the main takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
And in my view, the only way you can really form that unbreakable bond is when you go through some sort of struggle, some sort of hardship. You don't form deep bonds when things are good. You form those unbreakable bonds when things are bad, when you're going through hard times. Maybe that's the main takeaway. Maybe that's the main thing to pull from this.
Yeah. And, I think hard times will do one or the other, I think. You've heard the old adage that hard times build strong men.
Right.
Strong men build good times. Good times build weak men, and weak men beget hard times. So it's kind of a circle.
Right.
But I think hard times too, it really reveals what your society is, how healthy your society is. Like through the depression, I know that people, my mom went through the depression and the shared suffering. That's
oh gosh, yeah.
That generation was bonded by that in so many ways. They had such a like mind. But that was when our country was very strong and very united under what I would call a worldview, a Judeo-Christian worldview. And, faith was very strong in this country. It wasn't always the same faith. We had, Baptists and Episcopalians and Catholics and Jews, but everybody had a belief in something bigger than themselves. If we have hard times in this country now, I'm not sure what will happen.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I know what I'm afraid is going to happen because of the state of our country. Because they always say, there's a lot of talk about civil war these days, just because our country is becoming so fragmented and so irreconcilably different. I mean, there are things going on here in California that I can't reconcile myself with. I would love to be, find a common ground with some of these things that are going on, but honestly, I don't see how I can. So how is that going to be? So, and there's no war like a civil war. And regular wars are bad, but when something about civil wars, when brother is fighting brother, or neighbor is fighting neighbor, it gets especially nasty. And
Yeah.
historically, anyway, if you're a historian, you can probably back me up on that.
Mhm.
So it's funny. I think they reveal character. One of those things, just reading into your story about being a 30-year-old guy in this cadet where you're, you know, the one having to lug the boxes around, you had the humility to do it, right?
Mhm. Right.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure those guys were looking at him. This guy's a grown arse man here, and he's doing this. He's taking order from me. I'm sure that in an institution like that, that is concerned with how you represent the university and has put that much thought into, okay, this, we don't do these just because we're a bunch of drunken frat boys, right?
No, it wasn't like that at all. No.
Yeah, no, we do this for a purpose. I'm sure those
Right.
guys were looking at you and saying, look at Ben, that guy, he's older than me, that he's still taking orders from me. That's the kind of guy I can follow because you had the
Mhm.
humility to do it. You weren't too big for your britches or whatever that you would call it back then, or in that part, whatever Texas says. Yeah.
And you know
But
what? It's funny. It's
you
funny
weren't
that
you
mentioned
weren't
that.
you weren't all hat and no cattle, put it that way.
Right. Yeah. It's funny they
Right.
mentioned that because with veterans in particular, I have seen two types of veterans. I have seen those who get out, struggle, and who really try to make something of themselves. But then I've seen veterans who get out and they can't reconcile the fact that they're out. They keep wanting to think like they're back in. They keep wanting to act like they're still serving. Um, and they just refuse to get help. They refuse to humble themselves. They refuse to learn how to be a civilian. They refuse to move forward. And
Yeah.
that's really the saddest part.
We have a lot of a lot of Marine veterans around this area. And you do run into that person that still thinks he's a Marine. He's in charge and still does things as a Marine. And it's funny, one of our neighbors was an ex-Marine, or I guess there is no ex-Marine. I'm sorry. He's a retired Marine. And we were in a Bible study once, and he goes, when I was in the Marine Corps, I didn't have this sensitivity to other people. And I was rough, and now I feel so bad about that. And I said, whoa. I said, a kind, gentle, sensitive Marine is useless on the battlefield. Okay.
Right. For that job.
For that job. Your
purpose.
job was to, as the old Rush Limbaugh line, the military's job is to kill people and break their stuff. And when we try and make it something other than that, that's when it starts going. But yet, how do you, when you're trained to kill people and break their stuff, and they're all of a sudden like, okay, you're free now. We don't need you long right now. Go into society. If you don't have a lot of other Marines around you or a lot of military people to show you, or at least talk about it. I also saw, this is something I saw the other day, the difference between World War II veterans and Vietnam veterans. And it was really interesting. They said the World War II veterans, when they came home from Europe or Japan, they came on ships. They were sent all together on ships, and it took 2 or 3 weeks to get home. So what were they doing on those ships? They were talking to their guys from other companies, guys from France, guys that fought in Italy, guys that fought in, the Philippines, or guys that fought in, China, Burma, or whatever. They were all together, and they talked it out. They compared notes, and they said this. The Vietnam guys got put on a plane. 10 hours later, they were in home, and they didn't have a debrief time like that. And that's why one of the reasons they struggled so much. So you're right.
There's no celebrations. There were no parades. There was no.
Oh no, we were horrible to them. Society was horrible to them, and so it goes to what you're saying. Even though you didn't maybe even go through that with this guy, this brother, this fellow Army guy or Marine, or our first guy that was coming, you had that. He understood what you went through because he did something similar, and you understood what he went through. Now I'm not the only one. So, and plus those World War II vets, when they got into society, when they went out of the workforce, there was always, wherever they went, there was a World War II veteran. that
Right.
they could connect with. But now, since we're not all military, we don't all have shared military experience, even 1 or 2 years. If you just went in the army or whatever for a couple of years, like they used to do and serve, or like they do in Israel still, everybody serves for a couple of years, right?
A lot of countries in the world require military service for a
Yeah.
couple of years.
I think we that might be something that hurt long term, has hurt our society when we made army service voluntary instead of
Mhm.
compulsory. So
There's a verse I wanted to focus on real quick. This is Proverbs 17:17. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. That one's really big to this, because to close this all out, a friend loves at all times, but a brother is born for adversity. That can be applied to sister as well. When it says a brother is born for pain, for struggle, crucibles, however you want to say it, that's the main takeaway. You can have friends all you want. You're not going to have a brother or a sister unless you go through pain together. And I can't even begin to imagine the bond that the disciples had when Christ came back and then ascended to his Father. I can't even begin to imagine the bond that these guys had for each other. They just endured the joys of Christ on the earth. They endured the crucifixion. They went through the resurrection. That's like the ultimate. That is the ultimate hard time, right? You can't get harder than that. And so for these guys to go their separate ways off into the world and be fishers of men, to spread the gospel, no matter where they were, they still had that bond.
Right.
Why? Because they went to university together.
Right. And interesting enough, that's what Jesus said was the key to their mission and to their witness going forward. He told them, be one, be unified, be one as I and the Father are one. Love one another. Don't go out and love the world. That's where we get it wrong now.
Right.
When we say we got to love the world, that's with all the lockdowns. Everybody closed their church because we got to show the world that we love it. No, we need to show the world that we love each other. And that's why the divisions in the body are so bad, because that's the key to it. Jesus said, when you are one, when you love each other, when you're unified as I and the Father are one, then the world will know that I'm from the Father. That's how the world knows, just because of our love for each other and our unity and our bond with each other. That's why it's so tragic when things get ripped apart. So yeah, that's our best witness, is when we are bound together. And if it takes persecution, that might be what comes, because don't forget, in the book of Acts, the disciples didn't go immediately. They got in Jerusalem, that early church, they started, they got all these people together, and then they stayed in their holy huddle. And it was great at first, but then all of a sudden they started arguing about who's serving tables and who's not, and comparing, I gave more than you did. And that ended up 2 people dying, right? Because they lied about what they get. So finally, God had to send a persecution and say, I told you to go, you need to go. And then they need to, so through that persecution, that's when he sent them out. I think you're really onto something with that shared experience, because when you were talking about that, it just occurred to me, that's what Jesus said.
Right.
That bond that you form is going to be what shows the world that I'm from the Father. So,
and that's,
but then you need to go.
Right. And I would say that's the hardest thing for a lot of Christians today to do, especially now. The last thing most Christians want to do is go through more adversity.
Yeah.
The last thing you want to do is go through more pain.
We avoid it like the plague. Yeah, we do. So.
But I guess in my situation, for the longest time, I looked at this as a bad thing, but now I'm looking at it as a good thing. My whole life has been adversity. It's been one crap sandwich after the other. But today though, I can look at it and apply humor to it because it's like, yeah, of course.
Well, that's that
normal.
character. That's that character you showed by being the low man on the totem pole, even though you're
Right.
older. Good, so good for you. Yeah.
And then after college, I met my wife, got married, and we've been through our own adversities, absolutely, and we're still going through it. But it's so normal to us now that it's like, oh, it's happening. Okay, like it's not.
Bring it on,
We
right?
deal with it,
Yeah.
but it's not. It's not the deal breaker. Does that make sense? It just makes the deal stronger. So that's all we got for today, guys.
Yep.
Whole point is you will form bonds with people, and those bonds are unbreakable. Not because of good times, but because of the hard times, because you went through that hard time together. So, Joel, anything else you got?
Good subject today, man. That was a good show.
Thank you.
I like it. Thanks for all the good comments, people, too.
Yeah, awesome comments. All right, Patriots. Have a great day. Never surrender, never submit.
Amen.
Take care.